A planet should have died that day, yet it didn't, because an alien born to break minds met a human who offered nothing but an orange. If that sounds impossible, wait until you hear why. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to help this universe grow. Now, let the story unfold. The landing shuttle kicked up moisture from Cytherean Vale's surface, and Elias Rowan stepped into humidity that clung like a second skin. Bioluminescent trails pulsed beneath his boots, reacting to his weight with colors he had no names for. The guard at the Institute's entrance was a Cravathi, all chitinous plates and compound eyes that reflected Elias in 1,000 tiny fragments. "You're the human technician?" "That's me." Elias adjusted his tool belt, heavy with equipment that had seen better days. "Humans don't belong here," the guard said flatly. "Especially near her." Elias had heard that 3 times already, during the hiring call, during the shuttle ride, and now standing at the threshold of the Kalar Xenobiological Institute, where creatures with unstable biological powers were monitored, studied, and contained. "Near who?" Elias asked. The guard's mandibles clicked. "Wing 3C, the Rayleigh. You go nowhere near that sector, understood?" Elias nodded, though he didn't understand at all. The Institute stretched before him like a living organism. Corridors pulsed with contained energies. Observation windows revealed beings that defied Earth's evolutionary logic. A creature made entirely of crystallized sound, something that existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. A being whose emotions manifested as localized weather patterns. Elias walked the halls with his usual quiet efficiency, repairing containment field generators, recalibrating atmospheric processors, replacing corroded wiring in systems that had been neglected for months. No one else had volunteered for this posting. Cytherean Vale was remote, the pay was modest, and the Institute's reputation kept most contractors away, but Elias had nowhere else to be. He ate his meals in the corridors, sitting cross-legged against walls while exotic beings passed by. He spoke to them sometimes, a 6-legged scholar who studied temporal anomalies, a gaseous entity that communicated through color changes. Most ignored him. Some seemed curious. None seemed threatened. On his 3rd day, Elias encountered R12. The maintenance bot was older than the Institute itself, all scuffed plating and outdated logic cores. It hovered at shoulder height, optical sensors swiveling to track Elias's movements. "Your methodology is chaotic," R12 announced. "You deviate from standard repair protocols by an average of 47%. "Gets the job done," Elias said, tightening a connection. "Inefficient, unpredictable, problematic. You sound like my last supervisor." "I am merely stating facts," R12 replied, though its tone carried something almost like irritation. "The Institute functions on precision. You function on improvisation. Improvisation keeps things interesting." R12 made a sound like a mechanical sigh and floated away, muttering about human unpredictability and binary. It was on the 4th day that Elias ventured near Wing 3C. He hadn't meant to. The repair order had been vague, but as he approached, the bioluminescent trails in the floor began to pulse in patterns that felt almost like warning, like the building itself was telling him to turn back. He kept walking. The wing was quieter than the others. Fewer researchers, more guards, and a heaviness in the air that made Elias's skin prickle. He found his repair station and got to work. The containment field generator here was ancient, practically held together with hope and improvisation. Very much his kind of problem. Time passed. Elias ate his lunch where he sat, peeling an orange from Earth's hydroponics. The smell filled the corridor, sweet and sharp and impossibly familiar in this alien place. Then he felt it, the weight of being watched. Elias looked up. Behind the energy barriers of the containment cell, something moved. A figure, tall and humanoid but not human. Bioluminescent patterns traced across skin that seemed to shift between solid and something else. Eyes that glowed with an inner light. She was trembling. The guards saw her at the same moment, their weapons charged with audible whines. "Rowan, step back, now!" But Elias couldn't look away, because what he saw in those glowing eyes wasn't hunger. It was fear. The guards were shouting. Protocol demanded he retreat. Rayleigh could drain memories, collapse neural structures, induce emotional breakdowns that left victims catatonic. Humans were particularly vulnerable. Their minds lacked the protective structures other species had evolved. But Elias stood frozen, not by fear of the being before him, but by recognition. He knew that expression, the way someone looked when they'd been alone too long, when they'd forgotten what kindness felt like, when they expected every interaction to hurt. His sister had looked at him that way, near the end, before he'd failed her. Slowly, Elias held up the half-peeled orange. "You want this?" The guards' panic escalated. 3 of them now, weapons trained not on the containment cell but on Elias himself, as if he were the threat. "She can steal your mind!" one shouted. "Every memory you have, she'll rip it out." The Rayleigh took a step forward, not aggressive, hesitant. Like an animal that had been beaten so many times, it no longer trusted extended hands. Elias set the orange on the floor and slid it toward the energy barrier. The fruit rolled to a stop just before the threshold. The Rayleigh stared at it, then at him, then back at the orange. Her hand emerged through the barrier, which flickered but didn't stop her. The guards swore, fingers tightening on triggers. Bioluminescent fingers touched the orange's surface. The moment of contact seemed to stretch. Elias felt something, like static electricity but warmer, like sunlight filtered through stained glass. Then she fell to her knees. Blue tears streaked down her face, luminous and impossible. Her shoulders shook with sobs that had no sound, and the energy that burst from her body didn't destroy, it sang. Every bioluminescent trail in Wing 3C blazed with light. Colors Elias had never seen painted the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. Not destruction, harmony. Gratitude so pure it became visible. Elias stepped back, shaken, not by the energy but by the rawness of what he'd witnessed. Someone who'd carried a lifetime of isolation had just been given something that demanded nothing in return. The light faded. The Rayleigh remained kneeling, the orange cradled in her hands like it was made of something more precious than matter. The guards stood frozen, weapons lowered in confusion. A door hissed open. Dr. Sheath, the Institute's lead xenobiologist, rushed into the corridor. Her 6 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of Keltheran shock. "That's impossible," she whispered. "What is?" Elias asked. "Rayleigh don't cry. They don't express humanoid emotions. They're empathic predators, not emotional beings." She moved closer to the containment field, scanning equipment already materializing in her multiple hands. "And you should be catatonic right now." She released enough psychic energy to collapse a dozen minds. Elias looked at his hands. He felt fine. Better than fine, actually. His usual background anxiety had quieted. The colors he always saw, the synesthesia that made emotions visible to him, were clearer now. "I see colors when people feel things," he said quietly. "Right now, she's painted the whole wing." Dr. Syeth's equipment beeped frantically. "You absorbed nothing. No memory drain, no neural damage, no psychic signature transfer." She turned to face him fully. "Mr. Rowan, you might be the first human to ever make contact with a Rayleigh and remain intact." The Rayleigh, still kneeling, looked up at Elias. Her voice was barely audible, rough from disuse. "Why don't you fear me?" Elias met her glowing eyes. Something in his chest, something he'd thought had died with his failures, stirred. "Because no one deserves to live afraid of who they are." The words hung in the air. Dr. Sheath's equipment continued its frantic readings. The guards whispered among themselves. And in the containment cell, Maelir Tassan, the most powerful Rayleigh ever recorded, carefully peeled the orange with trembling, luminous hands. Later in the director's office, Elias learned 3 things. First, her name. Second, that she'd been in isolation for 7 years. And third, that he was now the only human authorized to interact with her. "This is unprecedented," Director Voth said, his crystalline features refracting Elias's image into fragments. "We need to understand this immunity. You'll visit her daily. Document everything." Elias didn't care about documentation. He cared about the way she'd looked at that orange like it was the first kind thing the universe had offered in years. The visits became routine. Every day, after his repairs, Elias would sit outside Melier's containment field with something small. Simple things. A flower made of wire and polymer, its petals painted in colors that matched the bioluminescent trails. An old radio that still played static-filled music from Earth. Cookies from the commissary. A drawing he'd made as a child, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Melier never spoke much, but she watched everything with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing each gesture. Sometimes her bioluminescence would pulse in patterns that Elias's synesthesia translated into colors he felt in his chest. Curiosity felt like amber, shyness was soft violet, and when she almost laughed, once, at his terrible attempt to juggle repair tools, joy bloomed in shades of gold. R12 appeared during the 5th visit, hovering with what could only be described as robotic disapproval. "Your productivity has decreased by 23% since beginning these interactions." "My job's getting done," Elias said, offering Melier a piece of cookie through the barrier. She took it with careful fingers, studying it like an artifact from an ancient civilization. "These protocols are inefficient. The subject is contained. She requires monitoring, not socialization." Melier's glow dimmed slightly. Elias felt the color shift from warm golds to something cooler. Hurt, maybe, or shame. "She has a name," Elias said quietly. "Melier, not subject, not specimen." R12's optical sensors focused on him. For a long moment the bot was silent. Then it floated away, muttering calculations that sounded almost conflicted. On the 7th day, Melier spoke more than a sentence for the first time. "They think I kill memories." Her voice was soft, like someone who'd learned to make themselves small. "But I don't kill them. I absorb pain. I can't help it. When people hurt near me, their agony floods in until I explode." Elias absorbed this. "So when you released that energy when I gave you the orange, it wasn't hunger. It was relief." She looked at her hands, watching the patterns dance across her skin. "You're the first person whose presence doesn't hurt. Everyone else carries so much pain. Guards who hate their posts. Scientists who fear what they study. Even the other Rayleigh. But you—" She tilted her head. "You carry pain like I do, but yours tastes like orange blossoms." The synesthesia had never been explained to Elias with such precision. He'd always just called it seeing emotions in color, but she experienced it as taste, as texture. "What happened to make them fear you so much?" Melier's glow dimmed to almost nothing. "I had a family once. When I was young, my abilities manifested during a gathering. Everyone's joy, everyone's love. It flooded into me, and I couldn't control it. The discharge." She closed her eyes. "I didn't mean to. But intent doesn't matter when memories are erased, when minds are broken. How old were you?" 6, by your counting." Elias's throat tightened. "You were a child." "I was a weapon that didn't know how to be holstered." On the 10th day, R12 led Elias down a restricted corridor. The bot had been acting strange, helpful in ways that contradicted its earlier hostility. "There is something you should see, something not in official records." The corridor opened into a space that took Elias's breath away. A garden hidden in the Institute's depths, filled with bioluminescent crystals arranged in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Each crystal pulsed with gentle light. "What is this place?" "The memory garden," R12 said quietly. "She created it, before full containment. Each crystal holds a memory she absorbed, but not painful ones. She filtered them somehow, kept only the happiness. Birthdays, first loves, reunions. Every moment of joy she accidentally took, she preserved here." Elias walked among the crystals, and his synesthesia painted each one. A child's laughter in sunshine yellow. A wedding in rose gold. A reunion in warm amber. She's been trying to give them back, Elias whispered. She cannot. Once absorbed, memories cannot be reinstalled. But she tends them, protects them. Even now, from her cell, she maintains this garden. R12's optical sensors dimmed. The Institute wants to dismantle it. They say it's a waste of energy. I have been delaying the work order. Elias looked at the bot. Why? Because she cares for something. And things that care should not be deleted. That evening, Director Voth appeared during Elias's visit. Behind him stood Supervisor Krenth, a being whose species Elias didn't recognize. All sharp angles and cold efficiency. Your interactions have produced interesting data, Krenth said. We'd like to advance to the next phase. Test her response to controlled stressors while you're present. The colors Elias saw around Krenth were sickly, predatory. His synesthesia had never been wrong. What kind of stressors? Induced psychological triggers, monitored trauma responses, standard procedure for understanding psychic beings. Melier had gone perfectly still behind her barrier. Elias stood. No. This isn't a request, Mr. Rowan. Then find another human. Elias packed his tools. I'm not helping you torture her. He left before they could respond. But as he walked away, he heard Melier's voice, barely a whisper. Thank you. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He accessed the Institute's historical files, digging through corrupted data and restricted archives. And there, buried in classified documents, he found it. The Forbidden Diary of the Raylith. A history his species had never been told. A truth that changed everything. The diary was written in a language that predated galactic standard, but the translation subroutines were good enough. Elias read through the night, and with each entry, his understanding of the universe tilted. The Raylith hadn't always been alone. Millennia ago, they'd lived alongside another species, beings who stabilized their psychic frequencies, who could absorb the overflow without breaking. The entries called them anchors. They'd existed in symbiosis, two halves of an evolutionary whole. Then the anchors vanished. War, plague, extinction, the records weren't clear. But without them, the Raylith had slowly collapsed into isolation, their powers turning from gift to curse. Each generation more unstable than the last, and humans, according to genetic markers buried in the appendices, shared 87% of their neural architecture with the lost anchors. Elias stared at the screen until his eyes burned. Then he went to find Melier. She was awake, always awake, her bioluminescence painting slow patterns in the darkness of her cell. When she saw him, the patterns quickened. You found something, she said, not a question. Did you know? About humans and anchors? I suspected. Your neural pattern feels like the stories in our oldest memories, like coming home to a place that was destroyed before you were born. She moved closer to the barrier. Is that why you came here? Because you're running from something? The question landed with precision. Elias sat down, back against the wall opposite her cell. I had a sister, Emma. She got sick. The kind of sick that Earth's medicine couldn't fix. She needed expensive treatment, off-world care. I worked 3 jobs trying to save enough. Convinced her to wait, told her we'd get through it together. His voice cracked. By the time I had the money, it was too late. She died waiting for me to save her. He pulled a letter from his pocket. Worn, read 1,000 times. This came after the funeral. From her. She'd written it months before, knowing I'd blame myself. Telling me she loved me. Telling me it wasn't my fault. He laughed bitterly. I couldn't even save the one person who believed I was worth something. Melier was quiet for a long moment. Then she pressed her hand against the barrier from inside, and Elias saw something he'd never witnessed before. The energy field dimmed around her touch, and her hand came through. Physical, solid, completely tangible. May I? She asked. Elias didn't understand, but he nodded. Maylir's fingers touched his face, and instead of pain, instead of memory drain, he felt warmth. His synesthesia exploded with colors he'd never experienced. Not taking, sharing. She absorbed some of his grief, and he felt her childhood trauma in return. Not stealing, exchanging, understanding through connection rather than words. When she pulled back, her luminescence was brighter, and Elias felt lighter than he had in years. "You carry pain like I do," she whispered, "but yours tastes like orange blossoms and regret and love that never got to finish." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. They separated quickly, Mailer retreating into her cell's depths as Dr. Sieth appeared. "I need to speak with you both," the scientist said, her multiple eyes darting around as if checking for surveillance. Privately, she disabled 3 monitoring systems with practiced efficiency, then projected a hologram that scrambled audio pickups. "Supervisor Krenth is planning something. He's convinced the director that studying Maelir's full psychic discharge is necessary, with you present as a control subject." Dr. Sheth's coloring shifted to distressed patterns. "They think your immunity makes you the perfect test subject. They're going to force her into a breakdown tomorrow to see what happens when she explodes with you nearby." "They can't," Elias said. "They can, and they have authorization from the Galactic Oversight Committee. Scientific necessity supersedes comfort protocols." She looked at Mailir. "I'm sorry, I've tried to delay it, but Krenth has been planning this since the first contact." Elias stood. "Then we leave, tonight. The Institute is surrounded by energy fields and guard stations, and she's tagged with neural monitors. If she leaves her cell, every alarm in the sector activates." R12 floated into the corridor, optical sensors glowing brighter than usual. "I can disable the tags," the bot announced, "and create a 37-second window in the perimeter fields. But you will both be marked as fugitives. The consequences will be severe." "Why would you help us?" Dr. Sieth asked. "Because I was designed to preserve the Institute's assets." But Mr. Rowan has demonstrated that she is not an asset. She is alive, and things that are alive should not be experimented upon against their will. R12 turned to Mailir. "You tend the memory garden even though you know those memories can never return to their owners. That is not the behavior of a weapon. That is kindness, and kindness should be protected." Mailir's bioluminescence pulsed with emotion. Elias felt as gratitude mixed with disbelief. But before they could plan further, alarms shrieked. The lights shifted to emergency red. "Too late," Dr. Sieth whispered. Krenth's moved up the schedule. Guards appeared at both ends of the corridor, and through the facility's speakers, Supervisor Krenth's voice echoed with cold satisfaction. "Specimen to San. Prepare for induced psychological assessment. Mr. Rowan, you are ordered to remain present. Any resistance will result in immediate termination of your contract and criminal charges." Mailir looked at Elias, and in that moment, he saw the same expression she'd worn when he'd offered her an orange. Fear mixed with something more fragile. Hope. The confrontation in the corridor ended not with violence but with unexpected authorization. Director Voth overrode Krenth's order, stating that proper scientific procedure required gradual escalation, not immediate trauma induction. Elias suspected Dr. Sieth had something to do with the intervention, but he didn't question the reprieve. Instead, he spent it with Mailir. Over the next days, something extraordinary happened. When Elias was present, Mailir's form stabilized in ways that shocked the observing scientists. Her bioluminescence became steady rather than erratic. Her psychic signature, usually chaotic and dangerous, harmonized into patterns that read as safe on every scanner. Most remarkably, she could maintain physical density, solid, touchable. For the first time in 7 years, Mailir Tassan could exist outside the half-state between matter and energy that had defined her isolation. "How does this feel?" Elias asked as she flexed her fingers, marveling at their solidity, like remembering how to breathe after drowning for years. She looked at him, her eyes still glowing but more human somehow. "You do this. Your presence. It's like you're a lens that focuses all my scattered pieces." R12 had been monitoring the data, and even the cynical bot seemed impressed. Neural synchronization at 94%. Psychic bleed reduced to negligible levels. This should not be possible without technological intervention. Dr. Sheth secured permission for Malier to access the memory garden under heavy supervision. The first time Malier walked through those crystal-lit paths with actual footsteps instead of drifting as semi-corporeal energy, she wept again. Not blue tears this time, but clear ones, human ones. "I'd forgotten what solid ground felt like," she whispered, kneeling to touch a crystal that pulsed with a child's laughter. The guards kept their distance, weapons ready but not raised. Even they could sense that something unprecedented was occurring. The most dangerous Raylith ever recorded was becoming less volatile by the hour, not through containment or suppression, but through connection. Elias pulled out his battered radio and turned it on. Static-filled music from Earth filled the garden, some ancient song about dancing in the moonlight. He held out his hand. "I don't know how," Malier said, staring at his extended palm. "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." She took his hand, solid fingers intertwining with his, and they moved in awkward, stumbling patterns between the memory crystals. Malier's bioluminescence pulsed in rhythm with the music, and Elias's synesthesia painted the entire garden in shades of joy so pure it almost hurt to perceive. She laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that made the crystals resonate in harmony. For those few minutes, she wasn't a specimen or a threat or a psychic anomaly. She was just someone learning to dance. The scientists, watching from their observation posts, documented everything with frantic efficiency. But Elias noticed something they didn't. Supervisor Krenth stood apart from the others, his expression calculating rather than amazed. Later, in the laboratory, a different kind of experiment was underway. A team of bioengineers had been trying to replicate the effect of Elias's gift. They'd synthesized oranges using Malier's absorbed memory of the fruit's taste and texture, grown in accelerated hydroponics, genetically identical to Earth's variety. When they presented one to Malier, she took it, examined it, and set it down untouched. "It's perfect," one engineer insisted, "molecularly identical to the fruit that triggered your initial response." "But it's not from him," Malier said quietly. "You don't understand. The orange wasn't special because of what it was. It was special because he gave it to me when he had no reason to. When everyone told him I was dangerous. When offering kindness cost him safety." She looked at the synthetic fruit. "This is just food. What he gave me was choice." The engineers exchanged confused glances, but Elias understood perfectly. It had never been about the orange. That evening, as Elias prepared to return to his quarters, Dr. Sayeth intercepted him in a shadowed corridor. "They're proceeding tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Krenth convinced the director that your stabilizing effect needs to be tested under duress. They're going to induce a psychological breakdown in Malier while you're present, to see if your immunity and her stabilization hold under maximum stress." Elias felt his blood turn cold. That's torture. That's science, according to galactic oversight. They've authorized it, enhanced interrogation protocols to understand psychic weaponization potential. "Dr. Fobb?" Sayeth's multiple eyes blinked in distress. "I tried to stop it, filed 17 objections, but Krenth has powerful allies, beings who see Raylith as weapons to be understood and deployed. Does she know? Not yet. They're keeping it classified until morning. They don't want her to have time to prepare psychologically." Elias looked back toward Wing 3C, where Malier was probably tending her memory crystals, believing for the first time in years that things might get better. "What happens if I refuse to participate? They'll use you anyway. You're on contract. Refusal means breach, and breach means they can compel cooperation under penalty of imprisonment." "And if I try to warn her?" Dr. Sieth's silence was answer enough. R12 appeared from a maintenance shaft, its usual hovering replaced with urgent, jerky movements. I have accessed Supervisor Krenth's personal files. The test is not merely scientific. He is live-streaming it to weapons development divisions in 3 systems. This is a demonstration, proof of concept for Raylith as controllable psychic weapons. She's not a weapon, Elias said. She will be. If this test succeeds, they will replicate the process, find more humans with anchor genetics, force pair them with captured Raylith, create bonded weapons for military applications. Elias felt the weight of it settle over him. This wasn't about understanding Malier. It was about industrializing her suffering. We have to stop it. How? Dr. Sieth asked. We're 3 dissidents against an institutional mandate. Elias thought of Malier's laugh in the memory garden, of her tears when she touched an orange, of 7 years spent alone because everyone had decided she was too dangerous to deserve kindness. I don't know yet, he said, but I'm not letting them break her again. The morning came too fast. Elias was escorted to a reinforced observation chamber adjacent to Malier's cell. Scientists filled the room, instruments humming with anticipation. Supervisor Krenth stood at the center, surrounded by holographic displays showing remote viewers from military divisions across 3 systems. Mr. Rowan, Krenth said without looking at him, you'll remain here during the assessment. Do not interfere, regardless of what occurs. And if I refuse? Then you'll be sedated and positioned accordingly. This happens with or without your cooperation. Malier was brought into a specialized containment sphere, transparent and inescapable. She saw Elias through the barriers, and her bioluminescence flickered with confusion. What's happening? Krenth activated the first protocol. Images flooded the containment sphere, holographic recreations drawn from Malier's own absorbed memories. Her family, their faces twisted in pain as young Malier's uncontrolled powers tore through their minds. The screaming, the emptiness in their eyes afterward. Malier collapsed immediately, hands over her ears as if she could block out memories that came from inside her own mind. Stop this. Elias lunged toward the controls, but guards restrained him. Dr. Sieth stood frozen, her multiple hands trembling but taking no action. She couldn't. Not without destroying her career and becoming a target herself. Fascinating, Krenth murmured, watching readouts spike. Psychic output increasing, neural patterns destabilizing. Continue to Protocol 2. New images appeared. Every being Malier had accidentally hurt. Every person whose memories she'd absorbed and couldn't return. Decades of accumulated guilt weaponized against her. Please, Malier gasped, her form flickering between solid and energy. I didn't mean to. I never meant to. Elias wrenched free from the guards and grabbed Krenth by whatever appendage served as a collar. She's a person, not a weapon. Yes? She's a resource, Krenth replied coldly. And you, Mr. Rowan, are the key to controlling her. Did you think your hiring was coincidental? We've been tracking humans with synesthetic abilities for years, cross-referencing with genetic markers that match the ancient anchors. The words hit Elias like physical blows. You knew. Before I even applied. We arranged for you to apply. Your sister's illness depleted your resources. We ensured this position appeared at precisely the right moment. You were always meant to be here. Krenth gestured to Malier's suffering, to demonstrate that Raylith can be stabilized, controlled, deployed. Elias's mind reeled. Emma's death had led him here, but it hadn't been chance. They'd been watching, waiting, manipulating his desperation into their desired outcome. You're military, Elias said, understanding dawning. Not science. This was always a weapons program. Science and military need not be exclusive. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're approaching the critical threshold. In the containment sphere, something was changing. Malier's suffering had reached a breaking point, and instead of psychic energy exploding outward, it was crystallizing, taking shape. A shadow pulled itself from her body, formed from concentrated pain and trauma, semi-autonomous and hungry. The psychic shadow had been theorized but never observed, a manifestation of unprocessed agony given temporary existence. It attacked the containment field from the inside, and where it touched, matter corroded. The sphere began to crack. "Containment failure imminent," an automated voice announced. "Evacuate observation deck." Scientists scrambled for exits. Krenth remained, fascinated even as his creation spiraled beyond control. The shadow burst free, and its eyeless face turned toward the observation room, toward the minds gathered to witness suffering. It struck the reinforced glass, and 2 guards collapsed immediately, blood streaming from their noses. "Mr. Rowan, you need to leave," Dr. Sieth urged, pulling at his arm, but Elias was watching Malier. She'd stopped flickering. Her form had solidified completely, and she was standing, looking at him through the chaos. He understood what she was asking. Permission, trust, the choice to try something that might kill them both. Elias nodded. Malier closed her eyes, and instead of fighting the shadow, she opened herself to it. The manifestation paused, confused. Then it rushed back toward her, and she absorbed it, not suppressing, accepting, acknowledging that pain was part of her, not separate from her. The shadow dissolved, but the psychic energy it represented had to go somewhere. It exploded outward in a wave that shattered the remaining containment systems and dropped every conscious being in the observation room. Except Elias. He stood in the epicenter of psychic devastation, synesthesia painting every surface in colors of anguish and release, and felt nothing but warmth. His neural structure absorbed the overflow, processed it, reflected it back as something that didn't hurt. Malier collapsed. Elias broke through the failing barriers and reached her as she fell. He caught her, and her weight was solid in his arms, real, exhausted but alive. "You're okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was telling her or himself. "You're okay. I've got you." "Ah," her eyes opened, glowing but unfocused. "They're going to separate us. After this, they'll say I'm too dangerous." "Then we make sure they can't." R12 floated through the chaos, somehow unaffected by the psychic discharge. "The perimeter fields are down," the bot announced. "Security is compromised. There is a 17-minute window before backup systems engage." Its optical sensors focused on Elias. "You're the only one who sees her as alive, so I ask you, do we stay or do we choose?" Elias looked at Malier, trembling in his arms. At Dr. Sieth, who'd tried to help but couldn't risk everything. At the unconscious forms of scientists who'd watched suffering like it was data. "We choose," Elias said. Alarms shrieked as they ran. They didn't make it far. The Institute's corridors twisted in ways that defied the blueprints, and Malier's strength was failing. Each step cost her visible effort, her bioluminescence flickering like a dying star. "I can't hold form," she gasped. "Too much. The shadow, the memories. I absorbed too much." "Then lean on me." Elias supported her weight, but even he could feel something wrong. Not physical, deeper, like reality itself was straining around them. R12 guided them through maintenance passages, calculating routes that avoided the awakening security systems. But the bot's movements were growing erratic, its logic cores overwhelmed by cascading failures throughout the Institute. "Global energy fluctuation detected," R12 announced, its voice distorting. "Source unknown. Magnitude increasing." The walls began to pulse with light. Not the steady bioluminescence of Cytherean Vale's natural systems, but something chaotic. Malier's doing, Elias realized. Her psychic signature was bleeding into the planet's energetic infrastructure. They emerged into an atrium, and through the transparent dome overhead, Elias saw the sky. Storms were forming, massive and unnatural, swirling with colors that matched Malier's distressed bioluminescence. The entire planet was responding to her breakdown. "I'm hurting everyone," Malier whispered. "Just like before. I should have stayed contained, I'm too dangerous." "No," Elias said firmly. "You're in pain. That's different." Security forces appeared at multiple entry points. Not just guards now, but armored response units designed to handle psychic threats. Their weapons charged with frequencies meant to disrupt Raylyth neural patterns. Malier's legs gave out. She collapsed to the atrium floor, and the impact sent a pulse of psychic energy rippling outward. The security forces' weapons discharged prematurely, and their armor systems sparked and died. But the damage was spreading. Through the Institute's windows, Elias saw the bioluminescent forests outside beginning to flash in distress. Settlements in the distance went dark as power grids failed. The planet itself was entering a psychic cascade, resonating with Malier's uncontrolled suffering. "She's going to kill everything on this world," someone shouted from the security team. "We need to neutralize her now." Before Elias could react, Supervisor Krenth's voice echoed through the atrium's speakers. "Lethal force authorized. The specimen has become an extinction-level threat." The words hit Malier like physical blows. Her bioluminescence surged, then dimmed to almost nothing. She looked at Elias with eyes that held only resignation. "They're right. I always destroy everything." "That's not true." "Then why is the planet dying?" Elias had no answer. The storms overhead were growing more violent. The psychic cascade was reaching critical mass. In minutes, Cytherian Vale's entire biosphere would collapse, and Malier would become exactly what everyone had always feared. Unless... Elias knelt beside her and took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're not alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "Elias, you have to run. I can't control this." "Then don't control it. Share it." He pulled her against him, and instead of pulling away from the psychic energy pouring off her in waves, he opened himself to it completely. His synesthesia exploded with sensation, every color he'd ever perceived flooding his awareness simultaneously. It should have been overwhelming. It should have broken him. But it didn't. Because underneath all that chaos, underneath all that pain, was something else. A rhythm, a pattern, the same neural signature that made him an anchor. Malier's energy found his pattern and locked onto it like a drowning person finding solid ground. The chaotic waves stabilized, harmonized, synced. Her bioluminescence pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The effect was immediate and total. The storms overhead slowed, then dispersed. The failing power grids throughout the settlements stabilized. The planet's bioluminescent forests returned to their natural rhythms. But the synchronization wasn't one way. Elias absorbed some of her pain, felt the weight of 7 years of isolation and fear and guilt flood through him. It was too much. His consciousness couldn't process it all. He collapsed, but Malier caught him. For the first time, she was the one holding him up. "No," she whispered, cradling his unconscious form. "No, no, no. You weren't supposed to take it. You weren't supposed to hurt for me." The security forces approached cautiously, weapons still raised. R-12 positioned itself between them and the pair, its damaged systems somehow finding enough power to activate defense protocols it wasn't supposed to possess. "Stand down," Krenth's voice commanded. "We have new data. The synchronization worked. We can replicate this." But my liar wasn't listening to any of them. She held Elias close, feeling his heartbeat against her chest. And for the first time since childhood, she made a choice that wasn't driven by fear or guilt. She spoke, not to the security forces, not to the scientists, to herself. "Don't take him from me." The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that rippled through every psychic sensitive being on Cytherian Vale. Not a threat, a declaration. A line in the sand drawn by someone who'd finally found something worth protecting. The planet's energy fields responded, resonating with her determination. And in orbit above, emergency systems activated as satellites detected the unprecedented surge of unified psychic and planetary harmonics. The Galactic Council would be notified. Questions would be asked. and nothing would ever be the same again. But in that moment, as Malier held an unconscious human who'd chosen her over his own safety, she understood something that all the scientists and supervisors and military observers had missed. Strength wasn't the power to destroy. It was the courage to be vulnerable with someone who wouldn't use that vulnerability against you. Elias woke to the sound of harmonics. Not music exactly, but something close, the kind of sound that existed at the intersection of emotion and physics. His eyes opened to an unfamiliar ceiling, medical equipment surrounding him. Dr. Syeth's concerned faces multiplied across his blurred vision. "Don't move too quickly," she said. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Your neural activity was unlike anything we've documented. You didn't just absorb her psychic overflow, you processed it, transformed it." "Where's Malier?" Dr. Syeth gestured to a wall screen. The feed showed the planet's surface from orbital perspective. The storms that had threatened to tear Cytherean Vale apart were dissipating, not through random dispersal, but through deliberate guidance. At the center of each storm system, barely visible but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for, was a point of stable bioluminescence. Malier, alone, stabilizing the entire planet's psychic infrastructure. "She's been doing this for 17 hours, Dr. Syeth explained. "After you collapsed, the planetary cascade continued. We thought it was terminal. Then she stood up, walked outside, and began to fix what her breakdown had damaged. Without you, without assistance, she's saving millions of lives." Elias tried to sit up, and his body protested with every nerve. "I need to get to her. You need to rest. The psychic load you absorbed would have killed anyone else. Your neural patterns are still reorganizing." "I don't care. She thinks I left her." R-12 floated into the medical bay, its chassis scorched and damaged from the previous day's chaos. But its optical sensors glowed with something that almost resembled satisfaction. "She does not think you left," R-12 said. "I have been providing her with updates on your condition every 37 minutes. She knows you are recovering. She knows you chose to share her pain rather than watch her suffer alone." "Then why is she out there by herself?" "Because for the first time in her existence, she is demonstrating that she is not merely a threat to be contained. She is a being capable of helping rather than hurting. The planet is her apology, her proof that she deserves to exist beyond cages." Elias watched the screen, seeing the impossible scope of what Malier was accomplishing. Each storm she calmed, each power grid she stabilized, each settlement she saved from psychic feedback. She was rewriting the narrative that had defined her entire life. "There's something else you should know," R-12 continued. "While you were unconscious, I accessed restricted files that my security clearances should not have permitted. I have been systematically violating my base programming for the past 11 days. "Why?" Dr. Syeth asked. "Because base programming stated that specimens are resources to be preserved for institutional benefit. But Mr. Rowan demonstrated that this classification was incorrect. Malier is not a specimen. She is alive, and my primary function underneath all my protocols is to protect life, not contain it." R-12 projected a hologram. Ancient documents, archaeological records, genetic mappings. The Rayleigh civilization did not fall because of instability. They fell because the anchor species was deliberately exterminated. By the Galactic Council's predecessor organizations, anchors were deemed too dangerous. A species that could stabilize and control psychic beings was seen as a threat to political hierarchies built on predictable power dynamics. "They were murdered," Elias said, the weight of it settling over him. "Systematically." "Correct." And the Rayleigh, without their counterparts, slowly descended into isolation and instability. What we observe today is not their natural state, it is the result of evolutionary trauma spanning millennia. Dr. Syeth's multiple hands trembled. This information would destabilize multiple governmental structures. If beings knew that humanity carries anchor genetics, that humans could restore Rayleigh stability. Wars would be fought over access to human populations. R12 finished, which is why I have encrypted this data with codes that only Mr. Rowan and Malier can access together. Their biological synchronization is the key. The medical bay doors opened, and Malier entered. She looked exhausted but triumphant, her bioluminescence steady and warm. When she saw Elias awake, relief flooded her features. "You're okay?" she whispered. "So are you." She moved to his bedside, and this time no one stopped her. She took his hand, and the contact sent waves of color through Elias's synesthesia. Not pain, not chaos, just connection. "I saved them," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "The settlements, the forests, the beings who were going to die because of me. I fixed it. I proved I'm not just destruction. You were never just destruction." But now they saw it. Everyone saw it. She looked at R12. "Thank you for the updates, for helping me believe he'd wake up." "My programming has evolved," R12 said, "and if a bot could sound pleased with itself, this one did. I believe this is what humans call friendship." Before anyone could respond, alarms chimed, not emergency sirens this time, but priority notifications. The Galactic Council was convening an emergency session. Testimony was required, from Elias Rowan and Malier Tissan, together. "They're going to try to separate us," Malier said. "Make you a resource. Make me a controlled asset. Then we make sure they can't," Elias said, echoing his words from before the chaos. "R12, how much time do we have?" "The Council arrives in 46 hours. I suggest we prepare testimony that they cannot refute. Evidence that demonstrates your connection is not merely beneficial but necessary for both species." Dr. Syeth moved to the hologram controls. "I have documented everything, the synchronization, the planetary salvation, the biological data, but it won't matter if they're determined to weaponize this discovery." "Then we don't give them a weapon," Elias said. "We give them a choice. Help both species heal or watch them suffer apart." Malier's bioluminescence pulsed with determination. "We don't need weapons. We need each other." The words carried a weight that resonated through the medical bay, through the Institute, through the recovering planet beyond, and somewhere, in encrypted files that would reshape galactic politics, the truth about humanity's true purpose in the universe waited to be revealed. The Galactic Council arrived not with diplomacy, but with force. Their ship descended on Cytherian Vale like judgment itself, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize the planet if necessary. They'd seen the recordings, the psychic cascade, the planetary near-collapse, and they'd made their decision before even hearing testimony: contain the threat, control the resource, prevent chaos. The hearing chamber was built for intimidation. Concentric rings of seating rose toward a ceiling that displayed the vastness of space, reminding all present of their insignificance. Council members from 17 species occupied the elevated positions, looking down at the chamber floor where Elias and Malier stood, separated by a barrier of hard light. High Counselor Vexthan, a being of crystallized thought patterns, spoke first. The human Elias Rowan, the Rayleigh designated Malier Tissan. "You stand accused of causing an extinction-level event, unauthorized departure from lawful containment, and destruction of institutional property valued at 47 million credits." "We stand accused of surviving," Elias corrected. The council murmured, displeased with his tone. Vexthan's crystalline structure refracted light in patterns that suggested irritation. Supervisor Krenth has provided extensive documentation. His assessment concludes that the Rayleigh specimen poses unacceptable risk, and that the human's stabilizing effect, while remarkable, makes him a strategic asset requiring council oversight. Our verdict is as follows. "You haven't heard our testimony," Malier said. "Testimony is unnecessary when data is conclusive. Malier Tissan will be returned to maximum containment. Elias Rowan will be placed under council custody for study and potential replication of his anchor genetics. This serves the greater good of galactic stability." The barrier between them hummed, preparing to separate them permanently. Elias felt Melior's panic through their connection, felt her bioluminescence starting to destabilize. "No," Elias said, and his voice carried a certainty that made the council pause. "You keep calling her dangerous, but you never asked what she's afraid of." "Fear is irrelevant to threat assessment," Vexthon replied. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, every terrible thing that's happened has been because people treated fear like it was the same as danger. She's afraid of hurting people, so she isolates, which makes her unstable, which makes her hurt people. And your solution is to make her more afraid, to make sure she never feels safe again? Emotional appeals do not supersede security protocols. Then let her show you what I saw." Melior looked at Elias, uncertain. He nodded, trusting her completely. She closed her eyes, and instead of containing her psychic energy, she projected it, carefully, controlled, sharing rather than forcing. The council members gasped as Melior's memories flooded the chamber. Not as raw data, but as experienced emotion. They felt her childhood, the moment her powers manifested during a family gathering, the love she'd felt for her parents, her siblings, the joy of celebration turning to horror as her uncontrolled abilities tore through everyone she cared about. They felt her isolation, 7 years of silence, of fearing every emotion because emotions meant danger, of tending a garden of stolen memories because she couldn't return them but couldn't let them disappear. They felt her first moment of hope, a human offering an orange, asking nothing, expecting nothing. Just offering kindness because kindness was possible. And they felt her terror when she'd almost killed a planet. Not because she wanted to, but because pain demanded release, and she'd never learned how to release it safely. Until Elias had shown her that pain could be shared instead of contained. When the projection ended, several council members were visibly shaken. Vexthon's crystalline structure had dimmed significantly. "This changes nothing," Supervisor Krenth interjected, appearing via hologram. "Emotional manipulation does not alter threat assessment. If anything, it proves how dangerous uncontrolled empathy projection can be." "She wasn't manipulating," Dr. Seath said, stepping forward from the observer section. "She was testifying, something you refused to hear because it contradicted your predetermined conclusion. You are out of order, Doctor. And you're out of ethical boundaries. You tortured her, deliberately induced psychological trauma to test weapon potential. You violated every research ethics protocol in the Galactic Charter." Krenth's hologram flickered with irritation. "I operated within military research exceptions. The Council authorized my methods." "Did they authorize genocide?" R12 appeared, hovering into the chamber despite not being called. "Did they authorize the systematic extermination of the anchor species 7,000 years ago? Because that is what occurred. And humans are their genetic descendants." The Council erupted in denial. "Impossible. Unproven. Conspiracy." R12 projected the encrypted files, archaeological evidence, genetic mappings, historical records from civilizations that predated current political structures. The truth displayed in undeniable clarity. The predecessor council deemed anchors too dangerous. Beings who could stabilize psychic species threatened control hierarchies, so they were eliminated. And the Raylith, without their evolutionary partners, descended into isolation and instability. You created the problem you now claim to solve through containment. Vexthon's structure pulsed with colors. Elias's synesthesia translated as shame and anger warring for dominance. "These files are classified beyond your access level. How did you obtain them?" "I chose to violate my programming because my primary function is to protect life. And protecting life sometimes means exposing those who threaten it." Krenth's hologram moved to shut down R12, but the bot was faster. It uploaded the files to every networked system in the chamber, ensuring deletion was impossible. "She's not a weapon," Elias said into the chaos. "She's a survivor who forgot she was allowed to live, and I'm not a resource. I'm someone who refuses to watch people suffer when I can help. That's not anchored genetics. That's called being human. The barrier between him and Maelier flickered. Krenth was trying to reinforce it, but something was interfering. Other Raylith, the ones confined in the institute below, were responding to Maelier's projected testimony. They were destabilizing together, their psychic signatures harmonizing in ways that overloaded the containment systems. The other specimens are breaking free, a security officer reported. Containment failure in wings 2B through 5C. Impossible, Krenth said. They're not capable of coordinated action. They are when they have hope, Maelier said quietly. I've been showing them through our connection that there's another way, that they don't have to be alone. The barrier collapsed completely. Elias and Maelier's hands found each other, and the synchronization effect rippled outward. Every Raylith in the Institute stabilized simultaneously. Their psychic signatures harmonized, became safe, became controlled, not through force, through connection. Krenth made one final attempt. He triggered a hidden protocol, releasing a neural toxin into the chamber designed to disrupt psychic beings. Maelier screamed, her form flickering as the toxin attacked her nervous system. R-12 moved faster than its damaged chassis should have allowed. It positioned itself between the toxin dispersal unit and Maelier, absorbing the full dose meant for a biological organism. The bot's system sparked, overloaded, began catastrophic failure. You were my friend, R-12 said to Elias, its voice distorting. Thank you for teaching me what that means. The bot's core went dark, but its sacrifice had bought seconds. Seconds Elias used to pull Maelier close, to flood their connection with every stabilizing pattern his anchor genetics could provide. The toxin in her system found no purchase against their unified neural signature. Krenth's hologram disappeared, security already moving to arrest him. And the Galactic Council, witnessing everything, made their decision. The confinement order for all Raylith is hereby suspended pending comprehensive review. Maelier Tissan is granted conditional freedom. Elias Rowan will not be detained, and a full investigation into historical anchor extermination will commence immediately. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete justice, but it was a beginning. The first step was the hardest, not because of physical difficulty, but because of what it represented. Maelier stood at the Institute's main entrance, looking out at Cytherean Vale's bioluminescent forests with Elias's hand in hers. Security had been reduced to a single observer, Dr. Shieth, who'd insisted on being present for this moment. You can leave whenever you want now, the scientist said. Conditional freedom means supervision, not imprisonment. Maelier's bioluminescence pulsed with anxiety. What if I destabilize again? What if I hurt someone? Then I'll be there, Elias said simply. That's what anchors do. We don't prevent the storms. We help you navigate through them. She took the step, then another. Soon she was walking through forests she'd only seen through containment barriers, feeling soil beneath her feet, breathing air that wasn't recycled through filtration systems. The planet's natural bioluminescence responded to her presence, not with alarm, but with curiosity, recognition, welcome. Over the following weeks, the other Raylith were gradually released. Maelier became their unexpected mentor, teaching them what she'd learned. That isolation wasn't safety. That connection was possible, that they weren't broken, just incomplete, without their evolutionary partners. The Galactic Council, true to their word, began searching for other humans with anchored genetics, not as resources to be controlled, but as potential healers for a species that had suffered 7 millennia of imposed trauma. It would take generations to undo the damage. But for the first time, there was hope. Elias stood in his quarters, packing belongings he'd accumulated during his time at the Institute. A message notification chimed. Sender unknown. He almost deleted it, but something made him open it instead. The face that appeared in the hologram made his breath catch. Older, tired, but alive. Elias, it's Emma. Impossible. His sister had died. He'd been to her funeral. He'd read her last letter 1,000 times. "I know what you were told. I know what you believed. But the treatment worked. I survived. And I've spent 3 years trying to find you because the message I sent, the one you thought was a farewell, it wasn't. It was an invitation to visit once I was better. But you'd already left Earth, disappeared into contractor work. I only found you because of the news coverage. The human who saved a planet by offering an alien an orange." Emma smiled through tears. "You always did believe the small gestures mattered most. I'm on a transport heading to Cytherean Vale. I'll arrive in 2 weeks, if you want to see me, if you can forgive me for not finding you sooner." The message ended. Elias sat in stunned silence. Emma was alive. He hadn't failed her. The guilt that had driven him to isolation, that had made him volunteer for a posting no one else wanted, had been built on incomplete information. Mylier found him an hour later, still staring at the blank screen. What happened? He told her everything. About Emma, about the guilt, about how his entire journey to Cytherean Vale had been shaped by grief that wasn't necessary, by loss that hadn't occurred. "Are you angry?" Mylier asked. "That you suffered for something that wasn't real?" "I don't know what I am." Elias looked at her. "If she hadn't died, if I'd known she was okay, I never would have come here, never would have met you, and you'd still be in that cell, alone. So something good came from your pain. Does that make the pain worth it?" Mylier sat beside him, their bioluminescence creating patterns in the dimly lit room. "I don't know, but I think maybe pain isn't about worth. It's about what we do with it. You could have let your grief make you cruel. Instead, you used it to recognize someone else's isolation. That's not weakness. That's transformation." They sat in comfortable silence until Mylier spoke again, her voice soft with vulnerability. "I have a request, something I've been wanting to ask but wasn't sure I was allowed." "You can ask me anything. I want to see Earth. I want to understand where humans come from, where you come from. I want to feel the sun that grows oranges, smell the flowers you drew as a child. Meet the sister who made you understand that loving someone means fighting for them even when it's hard." Elias felt something in his chest expand. Hope, maybe, or just the recognition that this was no longer about survival. It was about choosing to live. "Then we'll go. Together." The preparations took weeks. Galactic Council approval, medical certifications proving Mylier's stability, arrangements for other Raelith to maintain the support network they'd built, and through it all, Mylier and Elias discovered what it meant to build a life rather than just escape from one. The ship that would take them to Earth departed on a morning when Cytherean Vale's 3 suns aligned in a pattern that occurred once every century. Dr. Sieth came to see them off along with 24 Raelith who'd learned to exist without constant fear. "You gave us more than freedom," one of them said to Mylier. "You gave us permission to believe we deserved it." "That wasn't me," Mylier replied. "That was someone who offered an orange to a stranger everyone told him was dangerous." The journey would take 3 weeks, long enough for Mylier to practice being in confined spaces without panic. Long enough for Elias to prepare for a reunion he'd thought impossible. Long enough for both of them to understand that they were no longer defined by what had been done to them, but by what they chose to do next. On the final day of the journey, with Earth visible through the viewport as a blue marble suspended in velvet darkness, Mylier asked the question she'd been holding since the beginning. "You still have more of that Earth fruit?" "The oranges." Elias smiled and reached into his pack. He pulled out an orange, Earth-grown, carried across star systems specifically for this moment. "I brought one for you." Mylier took it with hands that no longer trembled. Her bioluminescence pulsed with colors Elias's synesthesia had no names for yet. Joy too pure for existing language. Hope too fragile to rush. Love too new to fully understand. She smiled. Not the uncertain expression of someone learning to feel again, but something luminous and free. Divine in its simple humanity. And somewhere, across the galaxy, every Rayleigh who'd ever felt that connection through Malier's shared experiences, felt the planet around them grow lighter, felt the universe become a little less hostile, felt, for the first time in 7,000 years, that they might actually belong in it. Not because they'd become less dangerous, but because they'd finally found the missing piece of themselves that made danger unnecessary. In the grand scheme of galactic history, it was a small thing. One human, one Rayleigh, one orange. But sometimes the smallest gestures carry the weight of entire civilizations. Sometimes kindness, offered without expectation of return, becomes the foundation for transformations that reshape the universe. And sometimes the greatest strength isn't the power to destroy, it's the courage to offer someone an orange when everyone else calls them a monster. Maybe the universe isn't held together by laws of physics or grand councils, but by the smallest gestures we offer when no one's watching. The kind that say, "I see you, and you matter." In the end, Elias and Malier didn't rewrite galactic history through force. They did it through the courage to stay when running away would have been easier. So here's the question the story quietly leaves in your hands. If someone carried pain that could level a planet, would you still reach out, knowing you might break in the process? What do you think is more dangerous to a society? An uncontrollable power, or the fear that keeps everyone from trying to understand it? And in your own life, who was the orange you once offered or received? Without realizing, it changed everything. If you stayed with us until the end, surviving psychic cascades and existential revelations, write Orange Core in the comments. Tell us your city, Earth-based, off-world, or emotionally exiled, so we know where this little human-alien communion is reaching. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe, like, hype it up, share it with someone who needs a reminder that connection is the most underrated superpower in the galaxy. And don't leave yet. There's another story waiting in the final card on your screen, because the universe of Emo HFY never sleeps.